So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Koronovich. I'm the grad assistant here at the Boise Center. This is our last event for the semester, actually. It's the final luncheon colloquium, final event for the semester. But we have what's looking to be a quite exciting spring semester. So I just want to give you some previews before we send out our events for the spring later on this semester. So on February the 3rd, we have a really great panel coming to discuss race and the religious right, white evangelicals, white supremacy, and their consequences, with Randall Ballmer from Dartmouth, and Adrian Jones, from Morehouse, and Jonathan Metzl, who wrote the famous Dying of Whiteness book a few years back. And that panel will be moderated by Susanna Heschel, so it's going to be, I think, a great conversation. On the 26th of February, we're hosting our second annual virtual graduate student conference on religious activism, political change, political activism, and religious change. Proposals are due on the 12th of December, so spread the word. It's multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, so anybody and everybody can submit so long as they're in a grad program. March the 25th and 26th, the Boise Center, along with the Hanks Center for the Catholic Intellectual Heritage and the Fordham Center on Religion and Culture,
with great fear,
are hosting a conference in Chicago called Vatican II, Pope Francis and the Way Forward, where we've invited bishops from all over the country and a handful of journalists and theologians to talk about the historical context and some theology that sort of underlies the polarization that exists in the church, particularly the anti-Vatican II, anti-Francis strands within that.
So send us your good thoughts on March 25th.
Exactly. Survival is key. And we'll be continuing the exploration of Islam with a panel on Islam and discrimination in the spring. We'll be having a webinar conversation with two sort of pillars of sociology of religion, Nancy Ammerman and Jose Casanova. So much is happening. Follow us on social media. If you're not on our distribution list, please get on it somehow. Email us, call us, check in every now and again. We'll be happy to keep you up to date. So without further ado, the director, Mark.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Ward Holder is a friend of mine. That's the most important thing. He was also a historical and critical theologian and a professor of theology at Saint Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. He writes on political theology, biblical interpretation, and the influence of the Reformation on a later tradition. And like myself, he's a great follower and devotee of Reinhold Niebuhr, which makes him especially dear to me. His work, the book that's not out yet, is called Calvin and the Christian Tradition, Scripture, Memory, and the Western Mind, which will be published by Cambridge University Press in 2022. He has edited and co-edited many other books. The one that I like the best, to be honest with you, was co-authored, called The Irony of Barack Obama, which is a very, very smart book, and if you haven't read it, you need to go out and buy it now.
And since Routledge took over Ashgate's backlist, it's a lot cheaper now than it used to be. So, just saying.
I understand that the aging Johnny Depp is going to play you in the made-for-TV movie.
It's either him or Orlando Bloom. They're kind of fighting it out.
Right. So the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks for coming. What we're talking about today is a project, both a class and then a research project based on that class that occurred last year, that happened at Saint Anselm College and at a sister university in Tanzania, Tumaini Makumira University in Usa River. And how we got there and what we learned from this and what we think this means going forward is what this is all about. I'm going to back up just so I can see the screen. This is, all this, but because I'm a historian, it's really significant when you put the dates together and you start to realize, oh my heavens, 2020 was just about as bad. It was not just bad for COVID. Race in America just went south so badly. Ahmad, there it is. So it's not showing. Ahmad was killed February 23rd. Brianna, she's kept. It's really unclear. They break in right around midnight, so it's unclear whether she dies on the 13th or the 14th. But March, May, George Floyd. The protests start on the next day in Minneapolis. They start in other cities the very next day. 2 days later, President Trump brings up the, he quotes, when the shooting starts, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. You would expect him next to quote George Wallace. He didn't, but the violent attacks on protesters started occurring. Detroit, Kenosha, Kentucky, D.C. Trump's Bible moment occurred June 1st. Really, in like 3 months, and really, Ahmad, because he's killed in February, but they don't. The video doesn't go viral until May. This is really about 3 months. Again, just Ahmad Arbery is out for a jog. He's pursued by Gregory and Travis McMichael. They shoot him. No arrests, no discussion until a New York Times article and viral video. So the arrests aren't made until May 7th. At present, Travis McMichael is trying to suppress evidence of his vanity license plate with the stars and bars on it, because now he realizes that some people might see that as racially motivated. Prior to this, no, that's just culture. And yes, that's my sarcasm font. Breonna Taylor, she's asleep in her home. Police execute it's unclear, and you can find police reports that will say both of these. It's either a no-knock warrant or a knock and announce warrant. The boyfriend who was with her says, I didn't hear anything. They break the door down. He thinks it's her ex-boyfriend come to rough him up, and he fires a gun in defense. He shoots a policeman. The police return fire, kill Breonna. No significant charges. The only charge was a charge of reckless endangerment for one of the policemen who shot without line of sight into a neighboring apartment. Having said that, the city of Louisville terminated all the officers' employment, not as a condition of the settlement they made. The settlement, $12 million already given to the family of Breonna Taylor. George Floyd, and in all of these cases, these deaths are occurring over things that even if they had done them would be misdemeanors. I can't really emphasize that enough. George Floyd may have passed a counterfeit $20 bill. The penalty for that is not death, unless you're a black guy in Minneapolis. They took him into custody. This is all on tape. I know you've seen the tapes or recordings. Chauvin is charged with second-degree intentional murder, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter, found guilty of all charges April 20 of this year. He's appealing. All the other officers involved also face charges. This is June 1st. Protesters are cleared out of Lafayette Square with tear gas to make this moment possible. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says, I didn't know what I was being asked to do. I'm sorry I was there. And so Trump has said, you shouldn't bring Millie along if you're running a coup. I don't think that actually is a slam. So that's the context in which we began to think about this. And really, this started with me thinking and saying, okay, our department doesn't offer a course that is specific on race and theology. And it doesn't have offerings that seriously take up this. When I teach Catholic and Protestant theology, yes, Cone is there, but it's one day. Isazi Diaz is there, it's one day. It's not really getting into it. So, and to be clear, what Mark didn't say is I'm a full professor. As long as I don't do something untoward, I'm about as bulletproof as someone gets in academia. I can annoy people and get away with it. So I said, I'm going to teach this course. Yes, I know. I'm as white as people come. I like glow in the dark. My mother's people came on the Mayflower. And no, I'm not making that up. That we're that British. But this just needed to be taught. At the time I began talking about this, Saint Anselm College's faculty had a total of one African American on it. Now we still have only one African American, but we've added an African in the last round of hiring. That's a whole different story. And that person is not in theology. So I began to put this together and started out as really an enormous course of huge reading list taking on African American as well as Latino, Latina, or Latinx or Latine, depending on how you want to say it, men and women. There's a significant gap in the offerings at St. A's on this. The effects of racialized concepts on theological work really aren't well integrated into the courses. Frequently, on top of that, ethics is taught from a model of the individual. Ethics is what people do, like an individual. Don't have sex with someone you're not married to. Okay, that's part of ethics. It's not its entirety. And Kristen, I'm so proud. Okay. So the Insomnia Network for Racial Justice, which had only been founded in the summer of 2020, I brought this to them. They said, "Oh yeah, we would love to have it." The theology department chair said, "Absolutely, go for it." The chief diversity officer, they all said, "Yeah, go for this." Now, this is my sister, because people sometimes say, "How did you pull together a person working in Tanzania?" That's my sister. So, in conversations with Professor Cynthia Holder-Rich, who was at Tumaini University Makumira in Usa River, she and I began to kick, well, what would it be if we used some of these new technologies that we all love, like Zoom? What would it be if we had two continents talking to each other? We decided in July, note again, it's compressed time frame. Well, we're going to go for that AER collaborative grant because we had to have it in by August 1st. And because of her context, we said, okay, we're going to concentrate this part of the course and the research project on African and African American issues, and kind of leave Hispanic or Latine or Latinx. That's just not something that we're going to try. We're not going to try to do everything. We're going to try to do some things well. To show support, Saint Anselm has a fund for Catholic social teaching. They gave a grant to this, which then helped to lever, and we did get the AAR grant. In fact, we were the only grant, collaborative grant for this topic that was granted in that grant cycle. I think it was because they kind of came out with this in July and said, just get it in by August 1st. Yeah, great. We recruited scholars to speak to this course, and I say course because at St. Anselm it was a course. At Tumaini, it was a reading group. So 5 finally accepted. This is Angela Sims. She is the president at Colgate Rochester Crozer Divinity School. She is a student of Katie Cannon's. She's an ethicist working in Black theology. Her big book is on lynching. The next person is Elieshi Mongure. She herself is Tanzanian. She works for the Lutheran World Federation. She is their Africa secretary, and so she works out of Geneva. That's Jay Cameron Carter. Jay used to be at Duke, now is at Indiana, and he's got a Race, a Theological Account is an amazing book. Brutal to take undergrads through, but still an amazing book. Emmanuel Katangolei, I always forget whether he's Nigerian or Kenyan. I think. He's taught at several places. Right now he's teaching at Notre Dame. And of course, you will all know Sean Copeland. Sean said, yeah, my dance card is full, but this is too important a project not to. And the honoraria for these people might buy a dinner. They really were donating their time. The collaborative project at St. Anselm, this was a course for undergrads, 18 to 22, fulfilling a theology core requirement. At Makumira, this was a reading group for undergraduates, masters, and doctoral candidates. Average age, 39 and a half years old, speaking to the very different contexts. It was an elective extra. If you're doing a BDiv it's actually a bachelor's in theology. If you're doing a bachelor's in theology there, they tell you there are no electives. Every course is already selected and you have to take them in a sequence. And then we had collaborations. All speakers spoke through Zoom webinars, and there were 2 more conversations between students on race and colonialism. The research project that came out of this, I was in it. My sister, she's really a religious education specialist. Her doctorate is from it was the University of Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. They've changed the name of it now. But she's always worked, especially in African contexts and especially with women. We recruited a colleague of mine, Aubrey Shepner-Torres, because there weren't enough BC doctorates her doctorate is from the Lynch School. She is an education specialist, really works on religious education, and really helped with the qualitative research. There's a qualitative research project on theology, race, and education. The participating students filled out a questionnaire, engaged in group interviews, and allowed some of their assignments to be used for analysis. There were challenges, some big challenges. Arusha, Tanzania is 7 hours ahead of the Eastern time zone, and they don't recognize daylight savings. So for a while, for part of the semester, it was 8 hours ahead. The academic calendars were not simply different, they almost opposed each other. Like so much of our time, I'd be in class and they would not. North Americans were already feeling Zoom burnout by the beginning of this course. This was the spring of 2021. Tanzanian students, for them, this was like, wow, this is a cool new thing. We've hardly ever used this. The Tanzanian class schedule was changed a day before the semester began, which apparently is not that strange in Tanzania, but it freaked out the American prof. Like screaming. Internet, electricity, access to computers, very different in Tanzania than in the US. Having said that, that's not all, I mean, it's a negative in the sense of, wow, that's a negative. But it wasn't a negative for the educational purposes because my students got to see, wow, they don't all have computers. They're not all on Wi-Fi. Why not? And they got to learn. Student responses, they loved it. And especially I'm talking about the students who said yeah. And especially the opportunities to hear African American scholars into Zoom. This was one of those learning moments for me. I thought the meat was, you're reading these really phenomenal theologians and I'm putting a framework on it and so you'll understand. And they were like, no. The meat is that we got to talk with these theologians and then talk with people who are radically different from us. They asked for more next time. We'll talk about next time. Structural problems. Late-breaking changes to the academic calendar, Zoom problems, Zoom in general. This isn't my favorite way to teach. Let's put it out there on the table. All the researchers are European Americans. That's not the way this should be. We've got to broaden that out. Finding that is significant. Language barriers, plural. Kiswahili is already the second language for all the students. And when I say Tanzanian students, I really mean East African, because they're from various places in East Africa. They're studying at a Tanzanian university. They learn, the language of instruction is English. Radically different cultural contexts, and some of the students in the US rejected the concept of systemic racism. They would accept it until you asked them to apply it. What went right? We actually pulled it off. I mean, at times that was shocking. North American students, they never considered the effects of race on theology. Tanzanian students said they've never been invited to speak about racism by white people. North American students described the difficulty of being faced with people who live the realities of a colonized world. Tanzanian students recounted how difficult it was to read about North American white rationalizations for racial slavery. They ate Sean Copeland's article up with a spoon, but they were furious. Like this was supposed to be an hour, and it turned into about 2 hours of them screaming at my sister. What do they think we are? They think we're not human? What do they think we are? This is not a historical thing for them. It's a now thing. Tanzanian students recognize the church has been for the creation of segregation. All students said they wanted more opportunities to dialogue. Some of the first conversations in which they could be truthful with whites. Normally, Tanzanian students go to, when they meet white people, they are white people who are giving money to keep their university open. And they say, how are things? And they say, they are fine. And here, they could tell the truth. Painful subject. The Tanzanian students explored the Hagar narrative in William's Sisters in the Wilderness, and this was hard because finally some of the women said, "Yeah, well, that still goes on, right? That's not then, that's now." White students exploring why African Americans aren't members of their churches. White students asking why there's a course for the reading of black theology rather than, this is just theology and we're reading it all the time. Good question. Tanzanian students exploring why U.S. students didn't care more. Turning off cameras, lack of participation. And they asked the question, do U.S. students actually like racism? We know it benefits them. Do they like it? And yes, these are gut punch moments. Lots of tears. So I'm trying to be on time. Pedagogical strategies that matter. That's what's coming out of this. Stephen Ray argues for the necessity of decentering the white tradition. Sure, absolutely. Aylshire, Jennings, ATS work. Participation in programming at ATS schools didn't necessarily affect institutional change. Shocked I am. Jennings, the change we need. Students of color today will find more inclusive campuses, but not yet a vision free from segregationist habits of mind. These things are all true. Our early research suggests these aren't the things that move the needle. Invitation to speak and consider together was more important than we realized. It was the last thing we put in, and it should have been the first thing. Creating dialogical space where people are safe enough to express deep, difficult thoughts is key. If you're philosophically minded, Habermas like to talk about an ideal speech situation. If you're more in the literature of pedagogy, people now are talking about brave spaces. It needs to be a space where you don't have to be really brave. So you have to be, we think the group dynamic was totally key. The Tanzanian students were always among 6, 7, 8, 9 other Tanzanian or East African students who were saying, yeah, well, what Bertha said is right, rather than, well, you're out there by yourself. Combination of these things and webinars brought some experience of transformation. there is some recognition of systemic racism. There is recognition of theologies and the church's role in creating a racialized world. There's the beginning of understanding of colonialism. I want to be clear, this is early. It's based on a small number. And I also want to emphasize the crucial nature of a dialogue partner group. Future prospects. I can't do this again. Students are already saying, so when you teach that class again, I've got to find a new partner. My sister has retired from mission service, and without that contact, it's not possible. Contacts on the ground are necessary. St. Paul's University in Limuru, which is right outside Nairobi, they are putting in a state-of-the-art, and I really do mean that, state-of-the-art smart classroom, and that might be a good partner, but we shall see. Another possibility is HBCUs in the U.S. At my campus, not yours, but my campus, we're 90% Anglo-American. And we're about 4% African-American and about 4% Latinx American. So, the great majority of our students go through their educational career without a lot of conversations where the other person has just as much backing as they do, and we think that's significant. Recruiting speakers. The honorarium model was nice for the first time around. It's unsustainable. I can't get a grant every year, but my guess is that if we can get all the other pieces in place, people want to speak to these kind of things, and that's the beauty of a webinar. I'm not asking somebody to come. I'm asking one morning, can you talk to these two classes? Questions? Yeah, Kristen.
Thanks so much, Laura. This is a fascinating look at your development and then experience with this unique course. It sounds really valuable. I wanted to come back to something you said in the beginning about decentering whiteness, yet your mom was on the Mayflower, her people were on the Mayflower. We're not that old for the students reference point. So I'm piloting a new course, a graduate seminar on this topic in the spring. I have no connection to like a Tanzanian university, but I too have thought about like decentering whiteness and even decentering authority while teaching a topic of race and theology and ethics. Can you speak a little bit to how you navigated that in the beginning with my students will be mostly white, registration's not done, but like how you navigated that teaching qua white person about Black theology?
Sure. Partly by being blunt and saying, in the best of all possible worlds, I would be James Cone. And you would be learning from him, from the master, and that's not what we have. And I'm going to do the best I can. And I have to tell you that sometimes, I said this to the students, I have to tell you, some of these, when you read these, they will feel awful. When you read Cone for the first time, and you're a white person, you're not saying, oh, yeah. No, you're saying, no, we're not like. And I said, I've been there. I've gone down that road. I've felt those feelings. They're real. They aren't. There's something very different from being uncomfortable and being unsafe. And so we're going to walk through this together. Now, the reading list, very heavy. Carter, everyone. So we read not all their works, but works from all of them. Howard Thurman, Cone, King, Katie Cannon, Dolores Williams, Monica Coleman, and so the reading list itself didn't just decenter, but the white people on the list tended to be historians. So Carolyn Renee DuPont has written a brilliant book called Mississippi Praying that really kind of looks at the churches in Mississippi after Brown v. Board. And we did a chapter from that to say, this is what white people did. But most of the time this was black people, Hispanic people writing about what made sense to them. It's an effort, but I had to put on the table the very first day, I'm not the right person to be teaching this, but that right person isn't here at this college right now. And this is better than not learning this.
I've got three elements in a question. One is, I appreciate that you weren't taking all on, but I presume you had different genders in the class. So I'm wondering if there was any difference or any acknowledgement around the gender of the recipient. The second bit is, what do we do when we open up distress publicly? How do we kind of help people to manage their distress ongoing? And kind of a question like, do you think Zoom actually enables people to be more honest because they're not necessarily in the same room? So kind of what role might Zoom have played in letting people be more conversive?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so the first one, gender. So my syllabus is set, happy to send it to anyone. We did Black theology, and then we did womanism, and pretty deeply, and then we did Latino theology, and then we did Marista theology, and we were really clear. I think Dolores Williams is about as good a theologian as you're going to find, and pointing out, here's where she's saying the tradition is wrong, and the tradition matters at Saint Anselm. Here's where she says the tradition went wrong, and what that means for people like her, and why that requires a different model of thinking about even the atonement, a very traditional locus. So we did, and we had both genders in the class. Overwhelmingly, it was women in the class. Like 18 students in the class, and probably 13 more women. So that's on that. Your second point. Distress. Yeah. I think it's okay to be distressed. I think if you're not, at times, when you're reading Ida B. Wells' accounts, if you're not distressed, you've checked out on part of your soul. So yeah. And this was one of the things that the students in the interviews said time and again, that there was space to be upset, but that didn't mean we had to stop. And your final point,
whether Zoom enabled.
Yeah. Wow. I certainly want to do this class again. If I do it, I will have a far more specific Zoom policy for the students. Some students, like I said, by that point, they just, okay, camera not on. And some of the Tanzanian students were like,
yeah,
are they checked out? Second, students, American students in general, students that I teach frequently will do things that they find cute that turn out to be appalling. Well,
not at Boston College, but I'm sure.
Well, one of my students, a male, his avatar was a black person. Actually, it was like a mugshot of Tiger Woods. And I had to like pull him aside and say, you're showing your avatar. The students in Tanzania think you're black. He's like, well, no, it's just a joke. I'm like, yeah, it's not a good joke. And you're not helping. And he understood and said, oh, I never thought about that. And I said, fine. So yes, I think you have a point. I think that the Zoom medium allows some things that and certainly it allows you to bring in speakers.
Oh yeah, no.
You know that, and our students could speak to them, and that was actually quite significant.
Thank you.
What was the gender of the Tanzanian students, and what about Zoom for them?
So Zoom for them was, their connectivity is so weak that they tended to be all on. They would back out, and you'd have like 8 people on one screen.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And they were in their participation. They were saying. They'd start to say something and then say, Professor Holder, Rich, and she would finish typing it in the chat, or so it was good. It was actually very good the last couple of sessions, because we had kind of figured out some of the things. One of the sessions literally stopped midway through because they had a thunderstorm, and the entire, not just the campus, all of Usa River lost power. Cynthia got it back like 48 hours later.
And the gender?
The gender was about equally mixed.
In Tanzania?
Yeah. But the women were almost all master's and doctoral candidates.
Yo.
The men were far more filling out the lower ranks. Yes.
Just a marvelous course, and it's wonderful to hear about it. And it's so admirable that you put it together and pulled it off and so on. And I'm wondering, when you say that we did, you named a number of literatures, a number of authors, and you said we did them. what did you mean that you did them? Especially I'm asking, what was the pedagogy involved? I suppose when I think about this type of consciousness raising pedagogy, it's typically, as Dewey would say, there's very little achieved by abundant lecturing.
Right.
So I'm wondering, what was the dynamic?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming. So by this point, I'd worked out something that kind of worked for me, which was, so I would give an assignment, let's say a chapter or two of Cone. Then I would record a voiceover PowerPoint and post that on our course management software, that they could cover that asynchronously. Then all of our class time was spent on, well, what do you think? You know, you've read this, you've had some framing of it. What are you thinking? Or what problems came up? What are you excited about? So our class sessions were very much simply discussion. Almost no lecture at all, because they'd already had the opportunity for that. And the nice thing about that, I'm slightly a Luddite, but one of the values of this, student gets sick, misses, that stuff is sitting there. They can go back and cover it again, and frequently did.
Thank you. What I'm intrigued at, thank you, this is very interesting. BC is about 4% African American. Well, a third of our students, the official number we give is a third of our students are students of color, but the largest single group are Asian and Asian American. That's by far larger. We're about 4% African American. How would this have been different, or would it have been different if, say, instead of talking to an African university, the conversation between someone at BC and someone at a historically black college like Spelman or
Howard,
Morehouse or something like that, would the conversation about race and colonialism have been, you think, appreciably different? It would obviously be a different conversation, but I mean,
I think I know that the discussion of colonialism would be very different. You know, these students, many of them, their parents could remember living in colonies of Germany or France or Great Britain. So being colonized was in real memory. And the flotsam and jetsam that have come out of those shipwrecks of non-state building still exist. So I think the colonialism discussions would be very different. I think the race discussions, would be much that I in my head, they would be much the same. Having said that, I don't know that to be the case, and it's kind of why I want to reach out to an HBCU now. So I was thinking, well, next time I'll do an HBCU. Well, I'll reach out to a Catholic HBCU. There's only one in America. It's Xavier outside New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah, Black College.
And their entire theology department is white. And I'm just, of course, if you're familiar with Brian Massengale's work, there aren't that many black PhDs in theology or religious studies to pull on, and those that do exist get snapped up by schools that are going to be able to give more resources. So, I'm struggling with that, and it's not this semester's struggle, which is just kind of getting through, but got to figure it out, because the dialogue partner has to be real and own its own reality. Others.
It might be too early to assess this, but do you think there will be any ongoing impact on the curriculum at St. Anselm's based on the syllabus and learnings from this course?
Yeah. So I want to say, yes, of course. Yes. Yes. And so my department is 10 people, and 2 of them are Latinx. One's Cuban American, well, she's now naturalized, but she's Peruvian. There are Bible scholars. They're excellent scholars. They're great colleagues to have. But I have to say that recently the junior faculty member proposed a course and said, I want to do race and the New Testament. And there was serious pushback in the department. No, not from me. I was like, of course. What could be better? That'll be great. And I'll tell them to take your course and then take my course, and they'll start to get it. And but a lot of people are like, well, is that really then theology instead of Bible? And are you getting out of your lane? So this year, because as punishment for my sins, the president appointed me as co-chair of the DEI Action Plan Committee, because DEI is going to be one of the pillars of our new strategic plan. You get a new president, you get a new strategic plan. That's the way it plays. And I'm working with the subgroup that's working on hiring. We've just spent 3 years coming up with a plan for how we will become more diverse in our faculty. And I said, we need this in staff too. It shouldn't just be, okay, you can have Hispanic or Asian or African or African American professors. Those people should be deans and deans of students, and they said, that's really great, but we need a strong exemption when it's really important for us to do something fast. I said, well, when you have those, it means that you don't make any progress, right? Well, we think that faculty don't really understand how hiring works. I said, okay. This is going to be a much longer conversation. So, on the one hand, we work at this. On the other hand, this is a heavy lift, and I would never say anything else. But it's that important. It's worth what I'm putting into it, and more. Yeah.
All the material you covered, were there any like specific topics where the Tanzanian students were most vulnerable?
Yes. I think some of the East African women just found this extraordinarily difficult when it started getting into the use of women for patriarchal plans. This was, bluntly, this was far too close to home. Yes, that still happens. Yes, I know a girl from my village, or I know lots of girls from my village who were put into exactly that kind of situation. And it was a very hard conversation for them, because they couldn't see the way forward that would solve this. This seemed like, well, it seems like racism, where too many people benefit too much for anything really to change. In the same way, patriarchy in African cultures, too many people are too invested in the goods that they get, and goods is that they get from that to allow change.
Thank you.
Ward, this is your third presentation. All of them are STAR events, so thank you very much. This is going to be really important for us, and Karina, who's sitting right there, has been taking the luminous notes. It's going to be, as I would say, events at Boise are like Christianity. The afterlife is longer than the life. So we'll post this, and so people will be able to read about it. I think a lot of people like Kristen Heyer, who is sitting here, is teaching a course on precisely this. A lot of people, I think, at BC and beyond will be very interested, and probably you're going to get a lot of requests for your syllabus. So I would think about maybe copywriting your syllabus. Something more. So that's excellent. Thank you again. Thank all of you. You are all required to take food home because wasting food is a sin, as you know. So thank you. Please join me in thanking.
Thank you.
My pleasure.